Hello, everybody. Eyal here. What's going on? Um, I know that a few months ago I said I would do more of these streams, and now is my official start of hopefully continuous interesting streams and discussions. Probably most of them just by myself, and try to let out my process and my advancements in the audio world. But I thought it would be awesome to actually have this chat with someone who's super awesome that I uh, talked to this week and wanted to bring him on. So this is Adam Wilson from the UK.
Okay.
Uh, and Adam is a brilliant audio developer. I ran into Adam because I went to one of his workshops that he did in London on I think it was platform specific writing for audio stuff. He's an expert on doing like audio mobile apps, but he also does a lot of other things. A very smart person, and we had a chat just this week, and we just had so much fun in the chat where we thought, hey, let's just stream what we're talking about so that other people can experience that. So hey, Adam.
Hey, hey, Al. Yeah, thanks for inviting me onto your channel and suggesting that we do this live. I think it's the first time I've done something like a live stream chat like this. But I think it'll be fun. We seem feels so. One of the things that came up in our conversation earlier this week is that Eyal and I seem to be in a very similar place in terms of where we are at with our where we're at with software development and where we want to be going, which is mainly like we've both been freelancing for a while and starting to take on other developers to help us with projects. And myself, I started officially started a company a little over a year ago and have been getting more into project management and managing other developers and clients at the same time as beginning to seriously develop my own products. And so what started this
Oh, sorry, my
oh,
camera is going crazy. It's
you're
not
going
anything
on
with you.
focus now.
Yeah, exactly. I need to reorganize my camera.
The what began this conversation with Eyal and I earlier this week was Eyal put a post on LinkedIn, which really spoke to me, which was actually I don't remember exactly what the question was, or it was a few questions together. Do you remember what the question was?
Uh, there was a couple of posts, but so there was one post was I think I was just asking how people do handle like context switching and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was one. I think that was the one that I picked up. One
Yeah.
that I picked up on, and then another one that you were putting feelers out for potentially finding a partner.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm not sure if like I'm in the best position to become a partner, but let's just talk about, let's just talk and see if we can help each other out in other ways, even just by hearing each other and bouncing ideas off, because I think that it's very rare, at least in my sort of immediate circles and community here. There's no one I know in my area that does this, that does what I'm doing. And there's not a lot of people I've come across that are in even a similar space, but in very, very, Ayal's currently the only other person I know who is in the same position as myself. So it's been not exactly the same, but very similar. So yeah, it's been great to find someone, and it's just a bit, just to have a mirror to like reflect thoughts and ideas off from someone who also gets a lot of what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, like when we talked the other day, earlier this week, I was kind of amazed how much you and I share not just the same uh, position and process, kind of, but we also share, I think, the same problems and the same decisions, or at least similar kind of problems and decisions. Uh,
Yeah.
because because you probably should talk a bit more about this, because you've also done this process where you've created a company, but it's actually kind of like a freelance company where you're offering services of code
Yeah.
writing, of like writing audio software and maintaining and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how does it work? How did you get to doing that, right? Before we talk of
How
all
I
the other
got
stuff.
there, I can give a summary of this of how I got there. So the beginning really of my stepping into like audio development was actually, so just a bit of context. Before that, I've been doing web development for a long, long time. That was my how I earned my money, was through doing server side web development. And I took a little break from that. It was around the time when my first kid was a little baby, and then I had this idea for an app. I was trying to find a particular kind of app, which was a tuning app to tune instruments to microtonal scales. I could not find anything. I had an Android phone and I was searching the Google store. I couldn't find anything. So something in me said, "Hey, you're a programmer. Just build it." So I started and I tried. Look, I searched all the different frameworks that were available, and bear in mind, so this was around 2014. I searched and searched, tried a few different things, and I ended up settling on Juice. Um, and I started building. I was also learning C++, so it was a very rocky road at that point. I was doing it in my spare time, and yeah, it was hard work. I'd done some C back when I was at college, and I'd done lots of Java and various sort of mostly dynamic server side web languages. But yeah, C++ was a steep curve to climb. And then yeah, so over a fairly long period, I built this app and the first sort of big stumbling block I came across was in terms of usability, because I was trying to use Juice to do the whole mobile app. And I quickly came to the conclusion that many other Juice developers I realized, had also come to, and have come to since, which is that Juice is not ideally placed to do user interfaces for mobile applications. So and then the Juice Summit was, I saw an advert for the Juice Summit, and I was like, I really want to go to this. I need to geek out with other people doing this kind of stuff. Because back then as well, I worked with some other developers, but no one really into doing audio development. So and I didn't have loads of money, and that I was like, I felt like I was trying to get a free ticket basically. So I submitted a talk basically just to get in for free. And
That's amazing.
But I also felt like I had something really useful to share. Like I was well on my way to solving this problem of how to mix a Juice application with some native user interface, both on iOS and Android. So I was like, I think there'd be some other people interested in this. So it didn't take me long to write the proposal. I sent it off. A few months later, I got the response, which I wasn't actually expecting, saying, "Hey, we'd really like you to come and do your talk." And I was like, I have to do it now. Okay. So that was a great challenge. But that was the reason I'm saying all this, is because I felt like that was actually that challenge, and putting myself out there and doing this talk, which was a really scary experience for me. It's the first time I'd ever done that, was like a little launch pad. So even from that talk, um, Dave Rowland, who's now the lead developer at Traction, came up to me and he was like, because he'd been working on this mobile app for a client of his, and basically, yeah, he put me in touch with his client, and that became my first freelance gig. And so that was really, yeah. So I'd say, I think I've probably mentioned it in one or two forum posts in the past on the Juice forum, when people are asking about, you get occasionally people asking, how do they get into audio development? And I think that is a really good way to get yourself known, is to just talk about problems you've solved, or your processes, or whatever you think could serve other people to hear about. Yeah. So getting into like how I got, now I have a company. So for about 2 or 3 years, I've been freelancing, and with various clients, sometimes juggling things, but generally doing things on my own. And after a while, I was just really missing working with other people. It's quite lonely being a lone freelancer, being the sole person responsible for projects, and being the only and being as well as being the person that's interacting with the client. So with that kind of feeling like I want to be interacting with people more, and also I was getting some business coaching, and my coach was really encouraging me to what you might call scale things. So it's not just me, to bring on other developers to help with things, and to allow me to step away if I need to. So I can, if I get ill, I can rest. If I go on holiday, things can keep running without me for 1 or 2 weeks. And that was, really like, I didn't believe that was possible. But then I found, I started bringing on developers to projects, and then that was working okay. But then at some point, it just made sense to start a company. So it's just actually, there's a bit of complexity at the beginning, but it ends up simplifying things, because it's like the company becomes, the clients have a contract with the company, and the developers I take on have a contract with the company. And so then, and also, the revenue isn't going like straight into my account. It goes into a company account, which is its own thing. So then, and then the company can feed itself, and then you have this clearer separation. Yeah. And so that's been running for about a year, and there's been, some extra profits from the company I'm able to put into product development, which is kind of where I'm wanting to shift my focus to now. So, and I feel like that's, that was, it sounds like, Eyal, you're in a similar position in that respect, at least.
A bit, I want to say a bit too similar. It's even though too similar, but in a way, right? Because I was not an expert on doing mobile apps in Juice, and I was not doing all that stuff. But I happen to have worked on a microtonal music plugin, so that's a remote connection, right? Because I got into the microtonal plugin because it was a client work, right? It's not like your case where it's like your passion and your interest, right? You're very much into that world of of these
totally,
non-Western tunings.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Like, as a, in my other guys as a music producer, that's been, that was what drove me. In fact, that was the driver. In fact, really rewinding, that drive as a music producer, wanting to explore these different scales, is kind of what put me on the path to becoming an audio developer, to begin creating the tools for me to do that, and also for other people, to enable other people.
Yes, exactly, right? I'm just seeing it. It looks like I was doing a bit of mistake, so hopefully the video stream is not too scattered.
Okay,
to the
it's
just
fine
right.
from my end. It's fine. I can, yeah.
Yeah, but I think OBS is if I'm not zooming on the window, it looks like we might have done this whole stream with a weird frame rate. So hopefully, it's gonna be fine now. Who knows?
Okay.
Okay, well, we'll see. Anyway, so so yeah, like this is like I got to ask you a few things about this too, because I have like 50 million things to talk to you and ask you.
Okay, go.
Right,
I'll let you. I'll
but
let you
I got to know the music experience that led you to be interested in the microtonal stuff, right? Like what got you interested in that? Like what kind of
What got
music
me
were you doing?
interested in that? Okay. Yeah. Well, what got me interested in that was okay. I can just tell you a little story. So okay, the very beginning of that story is years and years ago when I lived in London. A friend of mine had a hang drum, which you're probably familiar with.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, this thing is just amazing. And I meant to borrow it from her for a while and then never got around to it. And I thought, yeah, at some point I'll get one for myself. And then by the time I got around to looking for them, they were like extortionately expensive and very hard to find. And then I was looking, I wanted to get something like it. And I was doing lots of searching and I came across a couple of these things. I don't know if I think they were made in Argentina. I don't know if they're available anymore, but it's a little tunable tongue. It's a tongue drum that is tunable. That's the key part, that you can. It's got these weights you can move around on each tongue to change the tuning. So I had that at a friend's little gathering of a friend, and we were having a jam with some other musicians, and my friend's brother-in-law, he'd been traveling in India a lot, and he just came up to me and he said, "Hey, do you know about excuse me, about just intonation?" And I said, "I'm not sure. I might have heard of it, but no, I didn't know anything about it at the time." And that was like a little seed that just dropped in to my brain, and a couple of months later started germinating, and I was like, yeah, what was he talking about? So I started researching just intonation on the web, and started finding out about it. And I found this really cool. I've never been able to find it since, some website with like a Flash based website, which they don't really exist anymore, right? With a diagram of what's called a lattice. It's like this grid type thing called a lattice, where they just had like a few dots that you could play on and play the tones. And I was like, wow, there's a chord here and there's another chord here, but hey, these two notes are like, there's two notes in this particular scale where it was really dissonant, much more dissonant than say a semitone. And that just I had a light bulb moment. Like there's like a whole universe of different types of harmonic relationships that we can use in music. And so I started reading more and more about just intonation, and for a while I was really like anti 12 tone equal temperament. Now I just see it as just another tuning system, right? Yeah. So that's what got me into it. I wanted to explore it. And then at the time, because I was recording instruments, I have this like harp thing up here, so I had these two instruments which are like, you can tune every single note. So that's why I started with the tuning app. So I wanted a tool that I could use to tune physical instruments.
Yeah, the issue with the well-tempered tuning is so interesting, right? Because if you think of like the history, some notification came in. If you think of the history of things in the world, right? Then in up until the era of Bach, right? Nobody would use a well-tempered instrument. It would all be just tuned according to whatever scale you're on, so you can get better harmonics, right? It would all sound so much better, and you had the leading tone would always be closer to the fundamental, and it will and everything will sound good to for music that was in one key or maybe in two related keys, like maybe, right? But then all the I call them the jazz players, right? Like Bach came in and they were like, no, I want to have everything chromatic. I want to do music that modulates to like every scale in the world and goes back. And that's where the well-tempered thing is more like a problem solver. It's not like something that sounds better. It's more like this is the only way where you can do music that modulates from C and gets to like F sharp major or like some weird dissonant interval in the middle of the piece and then goes back. So well-tempered was like the only way to make this music work. Right. But that's a very contextual thing to say, because if you're doing something that's not Bach music, if you do whatever, like if you do like Indian music or world music or any kind of like more interesting styles that, you know, that are totally content with not modulating to every key, then you can enjoy these, you know, amazing qualities of not well-tempered tunings, right? Because those really can sound better and richer than the well-tempered is just like a compromise, right? It's just like let's do something that kind of works for the piano.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, you know, there's so many musical styles that would not have come about without, you know, well-tempered or equal temperament, like, you know, like jazz and a lot of guitar music, you know, just being able to like play, not care about which chord you're playing.
Yeah.
You just play it.
That's
right. Yeah. And I've one of the things that I see is like a lot of, say, thinking about electronic music and dance music, is most of that is like just a few notes, right? It's or just at least one key, maybe a couple of chords, very repetitive, not much modulation, and it's generally more about, you know, about the groove, right?
Right.
And so my thing is like, you know, if you're not needing to modulate, why not just why not get those harmonies really nice and perfect and lined up together?
Yep.
And as well as that, I'm constantly learning from other people about, you know, different tuning systems, and I've, you know, been recently learning about a guy called Irv Wilson, who's no relation to me. Most people who are into tuning will have come across Irv's work, which is just phenomenal, and he came up with all these like ways of constructing different tunings with certain properties. And it's something I'm just learning about now, and incorporating into software as well. And
it's amazing you get into that. I think it's a fascinating world. I'm sorry. I have so many things to geek out with you about. So sorry that I was taking you away from the business talk for the.
I think it's all good. Whatever, you know, it's all related, and it's all good.
Yeah, and I also find that, I don't know, maybe it's just my, maybe it's me being, maybe me idolizing or idealize. I don't know. Maybe it's me putting a lot of emphasis on that. But I always feel that if somehow the business side of making money with music or software or whatever is whatever it's more tightly connected to our like core interests and our, the things that we love in music, right? Like in your case, like tunings or whatever it is, then I feel like that makes it, communicate better outside. And somehow that, even now, if we're going to talk about what you're doing with your company and your business problems, whatever, it all somehow finds its context, right? Because you've I feel like, at least from my vantage point, that you got to where you are because of your love of things, right? Which is why you submitted a talk on mobile stuff just to get into the audio conference, and and which is why you've went through this path to follow your interests or follow your love, your passion, right?
Completely. And Actually, just what you just said there reminded me of like when I was a web developer, I didn't care much about my code. I was, compared to, especially compared to now, I judged that then I was pretty sloppy in my code and my work. Although towards I was starting to get into like more learning about unit testing and better practices, but I didn't have much inclination or support to really get go deep with just what thinking about the code itself. It was just and most people I it was only towards the end of the web development career that I got a job where I was getting my code reviewed. But then I started to see how useful that is. And once I got into audio development, it's like these passions, though it's like, yeah, related to what you were just saying, like my passion for music and audio coming back together with my passion for programming, which at the beginning, when I was a kid learning programming, it was a pure passion thing. I was just like into computers and working out how to write code that made things happen on the screen or interact with the keyboard or whatever. So really, it's really brought me back to why I started programming, and combined it with my love for music and audio. And so that really, that combination has really driven everything really. So even now I'm like doing, running this business and having, clients, and, some of the clients, they're not, the projects aren't necessarily much to do with audio or music. But even so, this, now I've actually found a passion for code that's clear and clean and explains itself. And that is constantly growing and changing. And I'm reviewing other developers' code and learning from them, and as well as reviewing their code. So yeah, it's interesting how things feed into each other.
I think it's amazing you say that about code. Because I find I know it's funny. Maybe I'm perverted to think that way, but I find really strong correlations between code and music creation, right? I find really because I feel like music creation, right? If you want your music to be deeper and transcend and have be able to compose more interesting music that's more meaningful and whatever, you need to consciously always define and understand what you're doing, if whether it's technically on the instrument or in your collaboration with other musicians, which is something that is huge for me, right? Just like so you have to communicate what you're doing outside, right? So that you can make uh, um, you can create like tasks out of it, right? Some tasks is like, okay, I'm learning about this harmonic system. I need to learn how it works so I can compose with that. Or maybe I'm learning this piano technique, so I need to explain to myself what it is so I can be better at it, right? And I think code has the same qualities where to be creative, you have to make sure you can't just live in, in an array of tasks that do things one after another. You have to define things and declare them and make them have good names and explain what they do and how can they be improved, right? Because if you don't do that, then similar to what happens with music, right? Like if you don't invest the time in, for example, learning how to work with these chord styles or whatever, if you don't put the time in to internalize and define that process, it's just like random notes that you have to learn over and over, right? You have to
Yeah.
like imagine that every time you would have a new piece of music and you wanted to improvise a solo or a melody line, you're like, okay, which notes work with these chords? Let's think. This note might work. This, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right, but it's much more efficient to say, hey, let's think of a system of notes that fit with chords, right? We'll learn the system,
Yeah.
we define it, and then we can just speak in higher level terms. We can just like, oh, play over C Dorian or play over C Phrygian, right? And that's or play over C with these chord changes that has this system. So you have systems
Right.
that
So
you talk on,
you've got a
the
language,
language, and I can
a
communicate
specific
that.
language for the system. So all these like it's actually some, that's the side of music theory that I kind of know what they are, but the whole, the names of I couldn't tell you what the notes in different modes are
Yeah,
necessarily.
exactly. I don't
Um,
even think about that. I think about like high level stuff. I'm like, oh, I'm in F minor, and I'm like, oh, I
yeah,
know that this and this and this can work with. So it's the same thing with code. I think is the more you define the communication parts, right? The more.
yes.
I, I
And
think,
I think with both, sorry to interrupt, but I think with
yeah,
both cases, so what you've described is sounds like your experience being in a band or working with other musicians, right? Where you have to communicate. Like if you come up with an idea and you're like, you need to say to another band member, hey, can you switch it up at this point? So they have to know exactly which point in time
exactly.
and where they're moving from and where they're moving to. And with code, it's very similar, I think. So the sort of communication and the code style and all of that stuff becomes way more important once you work in a team, once you have at
Yes.
least one other developer. And actually, what I've realized is over time is that other developer could be your future self.
Yes. That's your
So
worst enemy.
yeah,
The worst enemy of me is the past me from like last week or last month, or
totally,
I'm
totally.
always
I mean,
opening the code like, who did that? Who's that? Oh,
I
that's
have
me.
like the code from like whenever I've looked into the juice part of this tuning app, it is just horrible. I
Yeah.
mean, it works, and there's some good techniques in there that I picked up from other various talks on sort of audio thread and GUI thread stuff. That's how I worked out how I was just learning about multiple threads. But oh man, the code organization, it's just horrible. It's a spider web. Um, compared to what I'm working with now. And I'm also grateful I have like one particular client I think I mentioned on our call earlier this week, who is he's also a programmer. He's more of a C firmware guy, but he's really into super neat code and no comments. The code should explain, or only comments only there if absolutely 100% necessary. The only comments we have are like to do items within the code, and he's been really great to work with. Because he's so into like again and again, like we do a lot of pair programming together, and he's like, it's like this process of like creating something that works, which can end up becoming quite big, and then gradually you reduce it until it's only the code that's necessary to solve the problem. And sometimes that can be like 1/3 or 1/4 of the lines that you originally had. And something he says again and again is like, oh, I love getting rid of code. And that's so different to that attitude is key, I think, to becoming a better developer. And maybe it's similar with music. Maybe you get rid of the stuff that isn't serving the piece of music until you only have the stuff that needs to be there, because it's very easy to keep at you're not with a piece of music. You can be like, I don't know, this is all right. Maybe I need to add something. And I've known producers who just like keep adding and adding and adding until it's like just big, it becomes very messy. And yeah, definitely similar with code. Yeah.
Yes, and I've it's funny. I fully agree with that concept. Like just like you mentioned about comments, right? I've read a great book by Bob Martin. He calls himself Uncle Bob. He's like a well-known writer and lecturer about like clean code. He has a book called Clean Code.
Right.
It's very
Oh, I've
famous.
heard of the book. Yeah. Yeah.
He writes mostly in Java, I think, but it doesn't matter because it's like conceptual. And he always
Mhm.
said that comments, right? They're like so comments is a thing that like you write the comment to explain the code, but then the code changes, right? So the comment now also needs to change, and it's very hard to keep the comments in sync with the code Because and what ends up happening so many times is you have to read both. You read the comments and you're like, oh, and now I need to read the code to see if the comments are true, right? If they're still up to date. Maybe those comments were, done a year ago and things changed.
Yeah.
And I've also worked at places, which is so funny, where comments would also mention specific people, right? And I would have to to figure out what the comment means. I'd have to go to that person, like would say, ask this such and such about this comment, and you go to the sometimes you'd go to this person, he's like, oh, I wrote it 10 years ago, it's probably not true anymore, like
right, or maybe they've left the company by then,
and then it was a fun game of you work in companies and you walk around the office to search for the person who wrote the comment. And I'm like, oh, instead of doing all that, just write it in the code so that the code expresses what should have happened and what should need to do, and I can just follow that. And hopefully that's really simple enough.
Like I'm really in this client I'm mentioning, he's also really into like long descriptive variable and function names. So that should almost become the comment. It's like I think it's possible to, with the combination of like clean code as well as long variable and function names, things can describe what they do and what they're for.
Yes, and I'm a strong believer in that. I think naming is super important. I think also that it's you need to make sure that there's no like ambiguity, like is it this or this, right? You need to be pretty clear that this is the thing that you want it to be. And then there's all these just stuff about for example, making sure, like one of the I think things that end up happening pretty quickly is that especially when you work with more than one programmer, is you start to have more than one way to do the same thing. And it gets pretty confusing, right? I don't know. It could be anything. It could be launching a thread that does something, or writing something that, I don't know, wraps an array or vector and adds this function. Like it could be like the simplest things in coding, and it could be more higher level things, like I know, creating a smooth parameter or something. Like there's all these like things that you do. And it's and if you don't like stop and say, hey, let's take a second to see if I'm doing the same thing over and over, right? Because what happens is you do the same thing over and over, and you get same or slightly different bugs in all the versions, and they never get finally resolved. Like you keep going back, you solve this usage of this usage of this, all the edge cases of this, all the edge cases of that, and it gets frustrating because you're spending all this mental energy.
So it's like you mentioned before that through your client work, I guess initially you're building a library, right? And so that's it. Yeah. So that I guess that would help to partly solve that issue. Like if you stick to using the library, so every time you realize I'm solving this problem more than once, maybe at that point it's time to add it to your library and then use it from the library from there on.
Exactly. And it takes a bit of an interesting state of mind to work like that, because there is some disadvantages to a library too, because
it's slower, because you have to it adds a bit of friction at the point where you're adding things to a library, because to maintain a good library, I mean, the library should have should be self-contained, right? It should have tests that everything is fully tested, by itself. I think, I can see that, like I personally, I haven't, I mean, there's bits of code lying around that I can reuse, but I haven't been building a library, and I think it's a great thing to do. But I think because I've been doing so many different types of projects, I haven't really come across that situation so much now. I think I'm getting more into doing plugin work, and I can see that maybe now it is that similar problems are going to come up. And I think something else that holds me back is when I have in the past had ideas to create a little library to do something, sometimes I've found that some like different contexts call for different things, and then
Yes.
to generalize a function or a class enough so that it becomes easily reusable can sometimes the work involved in generalizing it so it's as useful as possible for as many different situations can, maybe that would take more time than actually just writing that method for that particular context.
Yes, and that's, by the way, that's the I want to say the creative challenge in writing a library, right? I mean, it's true for any kind of code, right? Because usually, even within your project, there's parts that are reusable in that context, right? Even if you didn't extract them to a library that works for other
Yeah,
projects.
sure.
But that's a classic problem, right? That I'm always running into, because many times, because what we're trying to do, and again, this is an ideal, right? It's not like what in practice everything you mentioned actually happens, right? When we're trying to abstract something away and give it a name and put it in the library, but then we say something like, oh, that doesn't work unless we work with these assumptions of that project, right? That's a problem. So what we're trying to do is we're trying for the library to have as many low level things as possible, so that so that you can also use the bits and pieces in there to
Right.
have
Okay.
other things. So
So it's
here's
more
an
like
example.
building blocks.
Yeah. So for example,
Smaller
right?
build.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
for example, I have one of the big things that my library does is we have a lot of serializing functions, right? So I have this thing where you can serialize any kind of C++ type, right? Can have members in it, can have vectors or maps or whatever. And of course, it's not like in JavaScript where the object itself can just become JSON. Yeah, like it takes a bit of work to adapt the type, but it's we made it so that it's way less work than writing your own, like, I don't know, to XML and from XML or something,
Okay.
or two
Yeah.
value tree from value. So it was
Sure.
so it does saving and loading, and it does a bunch of other stuff that are needed for serializing. So when I wrote that at first, it only worked with a value tree or XML, right?
Okay.
But then I realized that now I started to do all these like networking things, and now we needed this library with all the types that we've already adapted and blah 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 to work with JSON or other formats, right? So I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
we now need to make sure that the serializing library has a solid interface that is not connected to the actual text format that comes out, right?
Right.
So now the serializing library is super clean. You pass it this interface, and the caller can decide later if it's going to be JSON, if it's going to be XML, and the types don't have to change. Like, they're clean, right? So, but that's a process, right? It's not like I had this thought from day one, like what problems are going to happen. What's more likely is that I wrote the library thinking, oh, it's just for saving presets of a plugin to XML. And then I realized,
Right.
oh, I need to work with all these websites. There's JSON that the websites need, or the servers, or blah blah.
Yeah.
So like and then
No,
they're
yeah.
like, oh, I need to rethink the general part of the library, right? So that it works with so it's low. It's essentially lower level. It has no knowledge of how the text format is, and that gets done later. So there's so that's a really cool process that you go through with your abstractions until you're you feel comfortable that the abstraction works for a lot of use cases, right? Sometimes you
Sure.
realize that one class you made called whatever, solve presets or solve threading or whatever, should actually be just a collector of a few other classes that solve the individual needs, and then each user
Yeah.
can just assemble them, right? So that happens a lot, that I have a class that we think is the ultimate solver, but then we're like, oh, we let's extract this out, this out, this out, and this out, and that class just becomes 4 calls, and then another class
Yeah.
is another order of these 4 calls or some other setup, right? So it takes a while until the use cases kind of reveal their true nature in a way. And definitely I see that the abstractions that work better are super low level, right? They're not like they don't make all these assumptions. They have very little assumptions, right? Like for example, if I have something like so for example, I have a bunch of data structures, right? So I have one data structure I have is is something like a stud map, but it's actually inside a vector, because a vector is faster to iterate and a map is quicker to insert and find like randomly, right? So
Yeah.
I made something that whenever you have a map, already have a map, you can just, instead of using stud map, you use map vector, and iteration is super fast all of a sudden, right? So that's a very low level thing. It doesn't make so many assumptions. It's like, okay, this is something where you can take whenever you need performance from your maps. So just put that in, and that's a boost. Or maybe I have something that does launch a thread in launch a function in another thread, right? That's something like and it's those things are solved, right? There's solution for those, but I've found a solution that is a slightly more higher level than this, right?
Yeah.
And those are the super low level stuff, of course. And the library does a bunch of high level stuff that and those stuff have a bunch of assumptions, right? Those will not work in random projects. Like you could not use those. Yeah.
Really interesting.
And
so
sorry to interrupt. We actually have a bunch of a few comments in like the chat. So I wanted to.
All right, cool. I've got. I mean, ideally, I've got about 10 minutes left. But if the conversation's interesting, I'm happy to go over a little bit. But yeah, let's go. Let's check out the comments.
Yeah, let's see what people are saying. I did not read those yet. So we got Almoni saying hi. It's a great comment. So Jelly says, hello.
Yeah, is that might be Yele.
Yeli, okay. Yes, Yeli.
Yele.
So it's Jeli. Am I saying this correctly?
Oh, no.
No?
Okay. Jeli, okay. There's a guy I work with called Yele.
Oh, okay.
But I think he's away at the moment. Yeah.
All right.
He's a super amazing developer that has helped me on multiple projects.
So yeah, there's a couple of questions that she I think asks where and maybe you'll have an answer for, right? So they say, hello, I lost my job because of COVID and started learning to code and got into Juice and everything. Is it normal to struggle in the beginning with everything, or am I too stupid? I started writing a synth. I started losing track about what data is coming from where, and where what is done. How can I clean that up?
Very yeah. I'd say the first question is like, you're not stupid, and it's this hard stuff. And I remember kind of rephrasing something that was at the Juice Summit. There was a talk, an introduction to, I think, it was a talk and a demo of do it with some live coding, possibly showing off the new MPE support in Juice by I think it was Fabian and Timur, possibly, who were then both working in the Juice team. And at near the beginning of the talk, I think it was Timur that was saying, so C++ is one of the hardest programming languages to learn, and audio software is one of the hardest domains to learn. So put them together, and it's just, there's no getting away from it's hard, and it will take time and actually years to get good. So I think it's important to be patient. And some advice I've seen from other people, although I actually didn't take this advice myself, is that it's sometimes better just to start with simple sort of C++, do a C++ course, or or get, do some simpler projects in C++ just to learn the basics of the language, before you start trying and build a whole project. But on the other hand, having the drive to create something, that's what got me learning, really. I was driven to create something, and I kept at it until I had something working, and then carried on trying to make it better, and then working on other, starting new things. So it's a balance to be had between those two things, I think. And regarding the other question, I think I don't know, that's a hard thing to answer just without knowing what the actual problems are that need to be solved, and the architecture and all that stuff. But I'd say there's some great resources like Josh's regular videos, the audio programmer.
Yes.
He's got some amazing tutorials.
Yes.
And as well, some of the talks from previous audio developer conferences, like one of the ones on that subject became quite, I think, got a lot of views, by Timur, which was when I can't remember the title of it, but he was talking about specifically this problem of using, how do you communicate between the audio thread and the GUI thread, and maybe have like a background worker thread if you've got complex calculations going on. And that's the talk that really, it's interesting. I thought it was so hard, this stuff. And I came home from the conference after watching this talk, and I just did it. I just coded all that stuff. There's something about being in a talk and being surrounded by like-minded people and having this knowledge beamed at you, that it just made it feel 10 times easier to actually take those concepts and start implementing them.
It's amazing what you're describing, because I think, I guess it's true to life as well as programming, but I think programming is one of these things that if you don't like just dive into and do them, right, they can be overwhelming. Like, oh my God, so much detail, and I've tried to decode something and nothing works, whatever. But then if you're, kind of drowning yourself in this world, and you're hearing talks by Timur, and you're watching tutorials by the audio programmer, and you go to conferences and you talk to people in chats, suddenly it all connects, it all clicks after right? Because I feel like if you just go to, just start out, and you can't compile your code, and you have threading problems, and you have this, like, you run into all these like roadblocks, right? But I think that, after a little bit, they're part of your life, right? They're not roadblocks anymore. They're things.
Totally. And with C++ especially, I think it's now that like smart pointers are much more, most code is used, and you have no idea why. There's just like, there's been so many times, like, I've literally spent days trying to fix a bug. And it's generally, because with C and C++, you can basically do whatever you want with the computer's memory. That can happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I just want to mention a couple of things from the comments. So first of all, the person who asked that the question, so I think her name is Jelly Sveta, but hopefully I'm not butchering the name. I'm so sorry about this. I'm butchering every kind of name, even in Hebrew, so hopefully this is not as bad. So I also want to shout out to a couple of people that comments on the chat. So first of all, we have Daniel FF Audio, who's
hey Daniel.
So he's been around and he's been commenting on a few things you said. I want to is also like he also said, for example, when we talked about how much removing code is like very satisfying when you do everything correctly and everything. And and Daniel is an amazing programmer, by the way. You should check out his stuff. He has something called Plugin GUI Magic.
Which is an amazing project. Yeah.
He essentially abstracted away all of the juice stuff, so you can all of just GUI stuff, so you can like design the plugin GUI inside the plugin as it's running. It's super cool. It's an amazing project, and he has other stuff. He has open source projects, and he's got the Frickwalizer project, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Lots of other cool stuff.
He's got a lot of great open source code. So yeah,
Yes.
I've recommended his juice, like just the metering code. I've recommended to various people.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm sure Daniel's code is dotted around many plugins these days.
Yes, and also I want to shout out to JB from Music Hackspace, who's joining us here. So it's awesome that people are kind of joining and participating. I love that.
Cool.
So yeah, so Adam, do you have to go, or can you stay and chat with me for another 2 hours? Like what are we doing?
I should really go, but if there are any more if there's like another question, I can stick around for say another 5 minutes. Any more questions? Or do you have any?
I have a last question. Before we because you've mentioned so many things I want to ask you about, and I feel like that we probably should do other talks if you want to, like if you have time.
Yeah, I mean, there's honestly like where I am right now in terms of like what sort of I've become interested in recently, which, as I said when we talked earlier this week, I never thought I'd get into this stuff because I thought it was all evil, is marketing. So like I've been, talking to people about it and reading up on, different what marketing actually is and all that. So that's a whole area we could go into, which is really fascinating actually, and a lot wider than I used to think it was.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
That's a whole conversation starter, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's something that I don't have like any of my personal products released yet, but that's something that I'm actively thinking about, right? Like because okay, so that's a cause for a big topic, but I'll just say something like that's like something philosophical. I'm thinking about. So I feel like music tools, just like music, right? It's something that needs to arouse an emotional impact beyond being, just a tool for somebody to do stuff. Like I know that my instruments and whatever, my piano here or the Nord keyboard I have right here under the screen, or I don't know, like any of my software and plugins, like they're things that I'm personally I feel connected to, like they're a part of who I am, right? I know they're tools, and I know there's some engineer who put them together and whatever, but to me they're like, there's a part of my identity. That's why I'm wearing a shirt with the band that I like, right? It's like it's something that represents who I am. It's beyond the music, right? I'm wearing it now as I'm talking to you about programming. So I feel like that's something with the marketing. I feel like that's the hard bit, right? How do you make people respond to what first of all, you make them aware, right? You have to get to them, even know who you are, right? But then how do you get them to go to the website, maybe try something, maybe buy something? Like you want to get them involved in what you do. And I feel like this is a very hard emotional barrier because people are used to using the things they already have. And if you have something new, like a new plugin or whatever, people need some time to, think about you as just like
totally. And that's like yes, I've been reading. Yeah, there's this book I've been just finished reading, which again I would never have picked up a book with this title a few years ago. It's called "This Is Marketing" by a guy called Seth Godin, who seems to have written a lot of really good books on business and marketing and for artists as well. But yeah, something he speaks about is you need to like that. There's a combination of like new and familiar that you need, that it's going to be different every time. So when like with a new synth, if someone brings out a new synth plugin, users are expecting to find like where's the first thing they're going to want to find is where's the filter knob, and how do I change presets, and that kind of basic stuff. And if it's like in a familiar format, they don't have to use much brain power to find those things, and it looks familiar. So, but then if you can inject something that's like just a bit different within that, or radically different, then you can pique people's interest like that. So, and there's going to be people who like love to explore stuff that's totally unfamiliar and really weird and out there, and there's going to be people who will not go near anything like that. And vice versa. There's
Yeah.
people like, if anything looks like something they've already got, they won't be interested in it. There was, you know, there's the people who are always striving for something new and exciting.
Yeah, but even beyond that, let me give you an example, right? So there's a bunch of things that I bought, like plugins and whatever, that maybe it looked cool to me, maybe I used it, maybe I didn't, maybe I got it because it's free, whatever. But there's companies that if they release something, I'll be like, I gotta buy this, right? I didn't even try it. I gotta buy it because it's by that company, right? Like I know companies that I felt have an emotional connection to me. Like it's hard to like even after. So like how do you make someone, even let's say after they tried the new thing, right? You want that person to keep talking about you and say, hey, this thing is so great, it changed my life, it's helping me every day, and you want them to talk about it on forums and Reddit. And so
Yeah.
how do you get them to do that organically, right, without paying some guy to be your spokesperson, right? How do you get people to enjoy what you're doing so much that they spread the word in an organic way, right? And that happens with a few plugins that happened.
Yeah. I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier in the conversation about passion. So I think if you're really passionate about what you're doing, that will come through. But it's also, I think, about steering things. So you're and that's where I'm sort of aiming to step into, or maybe I am actually stepping into it, is, and it brings up a lot of personal stuff, like, which also was stuff that I struggled with when I was focusing a lot on making music, is how do you really it's like, how do you allow yourself to shine and really like make, how are you serving the world, how are you making your mark in the world, who are you serving, and what problems are you solving for them, or what are you giving them, what kind
Yes.
of magic are you bringing into their lives from what you do. And I think it all comes down to that. So I think the more we can sort of just get the negative stuff out the way, the doubts and the I'm not good enough and I'm not ready, all that sort of stuff, get that out the way and really just step in and do stuff that maybe you have a voice saying this isn't good enough yet, but the this, I'm speaking to myself here, like the
Yes,
courage
yes, to me,
really,
but you speak to me as well. It's I'm thinking
the
about the
courage
same problems.
to step out of your little comfortable dark place where you're the only one seeing what you do, to really like showing people, showing the world, and in and being open to the feedback on that, um and really like seeing it as, I think, something I'm picking up now is part of that. There's for me a switch that I'm trying to encourage in myself, is going from like seeing everything as a potential for learning, for becoming better at what I do. So and what not taking a criticism as personal, and also realizing that whatever you do, whatever it is, it's not going to be for everyone. In
Yeah,
fact, you don't want it to be for everyone, because then it's going to be really boring and not it won't be interesting.
exactly.
So like getting comfortable with the fact that, there's going to be people who see your product or hear your music or see your art, whatever it is that you do, that are going to be like, not interested, or I hate it even. And that's fine. It's not for them.
Exactly. Yeah, and I feel like that's to me the part I like about this whole world we're in, right? I feel like this is a part where we went into for our personal expression and to connect with people who share that, and not necessarily to, you know, it's very different from somebody who's like, oh, I'm gonna make a startup and make a lot of money, right? It's like that, like we made
Yes.
this because like my purpose in life, I think, right, you know, is to connect with all these people who are, who are into things like me, and maybe give them some value and some help, right? If hopefully it's the music I write has that. hope for weird people who make weird, who like weird music, or it's for people who like the instruments or their software in a way that I do, right? So I feel like that's really where I want to be versus, making everybody like you, which I don't think is going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Eyal, I think I should really close this call now. It's been great.
Yes.
Are there any more comments you wanna that have come through that you wanna?
Yeah. So JB asks you if you market yourself, or do you work with Plugin Alliance or any of these other companies?
Good question. I'm at the process where I'm considering that, and I've had a chat with Plugin Boutique about a product I'm developing, who are potentially interested, but there's a bit of refinement to go with the product before they're ready, and I'm not sure if the way I want to do things would work with them. So at the moment, I'm going for like doing it, market myself. Yes. So having like, I guess, similar to what Rolly, how Rolly does it, really like a login thing, selling it myself. But I'm also open to like providing like license keys for it to be sold elsewhere. But I'm really like this particular product, which I haven't mentioned yet. I would like to demo it pretty soon. Is just entering into it, well, expanding the beta users at the moment. So, but I'm thinking and spending more and more time in communicating with people and trying to find out who am I. I'm trying to find out who am I serving.
Yes.
Apart from myself.
All right, Adam, I have so much more to talk to you, but we'll just reschedule whenever we have more time, and we'll continue this because this was awesome.
Great stuff.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
really, this is great.
Thank you, Eyal. Thanks for the opportunity and the time.
All right.
It's been great. Okay, I'm gonna leave the call now. Thanks so much, and thanks everyone who's been watching. Speak soon.
Right.
Ciao. Bye.